They found her half-conscious beneath the red cliffs, her dress torn like a page from a forgotten story, clutching a strand of hair that wasn't hers. The scout who spotted her tracks had almost passed them by, just faint impressions in the frost winding toward the mouth of a cave no animal dared enter. Inside, she sat silent among roots and rock, eyes like storm-washed glass, watching the fire die low every night. They said she hadn't spoken in weeks, that her hands still trembled when someone offered bread, that the locket she wore, bound with rawhide, was always warm, though no one knew why, and when asked what happened on the trail, she only whispered once, they never saw it coming. No one could agree on what it was, but the wagon's remains were there, burned spokes, twisted iron, and a child's bonnet caught high in a pine branch. No footprints led away, except hers. Subscribe now, because tomorrow's story will haunt you even deeper. You'll need it. But before that, let me take you to the day it all began. The town of Broken Trace sat in the crook of the hills like something the wind forgot. Dust gathered in doorways, shutters banged loose even on still days. Nothing here grew quickly, not trust, not trees, and certainly not second chances. She walked through it most mornings before dawn, before the saloon's windows bled light, before the blacksmith's hammer sang, before anyone had a reason to see her. They called her Clara, though not often to her face. The name came in murmurs. Clara the quiet, Clara the widow, Clara with the silver streak. That last one was for the line of hair above her ear, pale as ash against a braid of coal black. Some said it came the night her husband died. Others said it was always there, like the limp in her step, part of her shape, part of her curse. Clara never corrected them. Let them guess. Her cabin sat at the edge of the trail, near the stone outcrop folks called Widow's Spine. No one visited, not even the circuit preacher. Her curtains stayed drawn. A lantern always burned low, and if someone rode past at night, they might catch the outline of her figure through the glass, just standing there, still as the mountain. The general store kept her a ration box near the back. She never lingered inside, not even when winter came hard. She'd hand over coins, nod once, and vanish before her name could settle in the air. Rumors filled the space she left behind. Her husband was shot by a card cheat. No, he took his own life. Shame drove her out here. I heard she speaks to the dead. She doesn't speak at all. Truth was, Clara had spoken once, but words, like horses, had to be broken in, and hers had run wild too long. She'd tried once. After the massacre, but the sound of her own voice cracked something open. After that, silence felt safer. Solid. They didn't know that her left ear heard almost nothing since the fire, or that her hip ached worse when it stormed. They didn't know she still wore her husband's coat sometimes, just to feel the weight of him again. No one asked. And Clara had stopped wishing they would. It wasn't always like this. Years ago, she'd come west with that same wagon train, bright-eyed, wearing hope like a ribbon in her hair. Her husband, Eli, had called her Sunrise, said she lit up everything. Said she'd never lose her shine, but the sun is far from gentle when it sets. After the fire and the blood and the howling that followed, she came back alone, no bodies to bury. Just ashes and one scorched wedding ring tucked in a handkerchief, and even that she lost in the creek during a flood. She'd stayed out of guilt, out of grief, maybe both, maybe because the land where it all ended was the only place that made sense anymore. The townsfolk made space for her but never room. She passed the schoolhouse sometimes, listening to the children recite alphabets, their laughter spilling over fences. A girl once waved at her through the window. Clara smiled, a faint twitch of the mouth. The next day the teacher shut the curtains. Only the animals trusted her. A red fox lingered by her porch some nights. A hawk nested near her chimney. The silence they shared was unspoken understanding. She worked with her hands, mending saddles, fixing axe handles, scraping hides. Quiet work for a quiet life. But her eyes, storm gray and sunken with memory, told of a woman still watching the horizon for something she couldn't name. There were days the town forgot she was there at all. Others they remembered with a glance too long, a whisper too loud. She didn't scream, they say, just stared while it all burned. Maybe she made it happen. No one survives that sort of thing. And in some way, Clara agreed with them, because the version of her that laughed, that danced with bare feet in the rain, that read poems aloud by lantern light, that Clara hadn't survived. What remained was something quieter, hungrier, still, listening for footsteps that never came back. Then one morning, she found tracks outside her cabin, small, cautious, almost swept away by the wind. But there, pressed in frost, leading toward the woods, not hers, not anyone from town. Clara stared at them a long time, heart ticking slow and heavy. She didn't follow, not yet. Instead, she turned and whispered, more to herself than to the cold. Something's changed. It was a Tuesday when the wind shifted, not in temperature or force, but in feeling, like the air had overheard something it wasn't meant to. The town of Broken Trace paid it no mind. A few tumbleweeds danced through Main Street. The blacksmith cursed at a cracked horseshoe. The undertaker swept dust from his doorstep. Everything ordinary. But Clara felt it. She always did. Her bones caught things the sky hadn't spoken aloud yet. She'd just returned from the creek, her basket damp and lined with smooth stones, when she saw him, standing at the split-rail fence that marked the edge of her property. He wasn't from town. That much was certain. His clothes weren't dusty enough yet. The boots, though worn, had polish to them. His hat was broad and tilted low, casting half his face in shade. But the way he stood, upright, still, unbothered by the wind, tugging his coat, told her this was a man used to watching, not waiting. Clara paused halfway to the porch. They stared at one another across a strip of winter grass in silence. "Miss," he said finally, voice gravel soft. "I was told you do repairs." Her first instinct was to turn away, to vanish into the wood and shadow of her cabin. But something in his tone held her there, no push, no pull, just stillness. She gave a small nod, just enough to say maybe. He stepped forward, slowly, as if he understood she might run. "I have a saddle strap torn clean, mules still tied down the hill." He didn't gesture, didn't boast or barter. "I'd pay fair." Clara hesitated, then nodded again and gestured him toward the bench under the overhang. He didn't speak while she worked. Just leaned, back against a post, arms folded, eyes following the motion of her fingers as they threaded sinew through leather. He smelled faintly of pine and ash, not the sour scent of town, something older. After a while, he broke the quiet, not with questions but with a story. "Saw a storm coming out of Red Hollow," he said. Wind moved backward, like it was chasing itself. Clara didn't look up, but her hands paused. "I've seen things twist like that," he added. "Always ends in fire or flood." Still she didn't speak, but something softened in her posture. Shoulders easing, breath less guarded. When she finished, she handed him the strap without ceremony. He took it gently, almost reverently. "How much?" She held up 2 fingers. He dropped a silver dollar in her hand, brushing her skin. Just a graze, but it sparked something, heat, or memory. She pulled away too fast. "Name's Silas," he said, tipping his hat. "Didn't catch yours." She didn't offer it. He waited a second longer, then turned and walked away, boots crunching frost. She watched him disappear behind the hill, the silence thicker now, like something had entered her world that wouldn't leave quietly. By noon, the next day, whispers had begun. Clara didn't go into town, but she felt the glances, heard the names behind closed doors. Stranger asked about the widow. Came in polite, too polite. Probably a Pinkerton, or a bounty man. Don't trust anyone looking for the quiet ones. The bartender at the Salt Horn said Silas drank only water, sat in the corner. Watched everything, like he was reading a book only he could see. The preacher said he asked about old wagon trails, routes that hadn't been traveled in years, and the sheriff who never liked unanswered questions, watched Silas with a narrowed eye and a hand always close to his belt. But Clara didn't care for their gossip. She cared about the feeling, because Silas came again 3 days later, this time with a broken stirrup and a story about coyotes near his camp. "I figured you might know the land better," he said, glancing toward the ridge. She didn't reply, but this time she poured him tea while the iron warmed. Neither of them smiled, neither of them needed to. When the wind stirred through the trees, he tilted his head and asked, "You ever hear something in the wind that ain't wind?" Clara looked up then, just briefly, but it was enough. He saw the answer in her eyes. They didn't talk much, not in words, but something unspoken wove itself between them, a thread stretched taut between silence and understanding. He never asked about the scar just beneath her hairline, never stared at the way she turned her right ear toward sound, or how her limp grew heavier after rain. She never asked why he walked with his back to the wall, or why his eyes swept the tree line every few minutes. They didn't need to. Some people are drawn not by curiosity, but by recognition, and the townsfolk noticed. Strangers, been staying too long. Widows got secrets, maybe they share 'em. Storm's coming, I feel it in my teeth. Old Amos, who hadn't spoken much since his wife passed, muttered something outside the church. They say ghosts travel in twos sometimes. No one answered him. But late one night, Clara found footprints again, by the edge of her porch. Lighter than Silas's, barefoot, pointed the wrong way, as if someone had stood there watching her door, then vanished into the trees. She didn't sleep that night. Just sat by the window, lamp low, eyes on the dark line of trees. Silas returned the next morning, uninvited but not unwelcome. "Someone's following me," he said simply. "Thought you should know." Clara didn't speak. She just moved to the stove, lit the fire, and made tea, because she already knew. The thaw came late that year. Snow still clung to the North Hills in April, and wind clawed at windows like a thing half-starved. Clara stayed home more. Silas had stopped asking questions, and she'd begun leaving her door unlatched when the sky darkened. An unspoken invitation. But peace is never a permanent guest in a town like Broken Trace. It started small. A shutter, nailed shut while she was away. A message scratched into her fence post. Just one word. Leave. Then came the sheriff. He rode out at dusk, eyes cold beneath the brim. Clara stood in the doorway, arms folded, jaw tight. "We've had some complaints," he said. "Folks say you've been seen in places you don't belong." She didn't answer, just stared. "You and that drifter," he added, slow and sharp. "He's asking about the wrong people. Bad history buried under that trail. Folks want it left that way." Still, she said nothing. He dropped a folded piece of paper at her feet. "Warrant for questioning," he said. "You're not under arrest, yet." Then he turned his horse and left her in the cold. Clara didn't pick up the paper. 2 days later, the store refused to fill her ration order. The girl behind the counter, young, red-cheeked, wouldn't meet her eyes. "Ma said I can't," she whispered. Clara turned and left, basket empty. That night, someone threw a rock through her window. No note, no name, just glass and wind and a long splintering silence. She left before dawn. Not with bags or plans, just her coat, boots, and a bundle of flint. She walked west into the trees, where the old trail curved toward the ridge. The frost bit through her soles, but she didn't stop. Something in her cracked, not loudly, just enough. Maybe it was the rock, or the sheriff's eyes, or the way Silas hadn't come in 3 days. Whatever it was, it splintered her from the inside out. The why. Snow deepened near Widow's spine. She slipped once, then again. Her breath came thin, clouding ahead of her like a ghost trying to leave. She collapsed near the bend, knees folding beneath her. The ground was hard and waiting. For a long time, she didn't move. Just lay there, staring at the sky. The ache in her chest blooming like fire pressed beneath ribs. She thought of the old wagon train, the screams swallowed by flame. Thought of Eli's voice in the dark. Thought of how she never screamed either, not once. and now she couldn't even remember why. Footsteps came later. She didn't look up, just closed her eyes. A coat dropped over her shoulders. No fanfare. No name spoken. Just warmth, sudden and quiet. And then his voice, low and steady. You don't have to go farther to disappear. You already did. I just followed the echo. Silas didn't lift her, didn't touch her hands, just sat beside her in the snow, shoulders brushing. They sat like that for a long time, until the wind calmed and the frost around her stopped biting so hard. You knew they'd turn on you, he said. She nodded. They don't like what they can't explain, he added, another nod. But I think they're afraid of something bigger than you. Finally she spoke, hoarse, dry, like bark splitting in winter. They think I brought it back. He didn't ask what it was, just said, then we face it together. They didn't return to town. Instead, they made camp in the canyon. He built the fire. She made the tea. He watched the trees. She listened to the wind. When she woke, he was already up, carving something into wood. Lines, not words. Patterns, not prayers. She stared at him until he noticed. What? He asked. Clara tilted, her head, a question in her eyes. He answered without her asking. I had a brother. Lost him out near the divide. I carved to remember him. She looked down at the shapes. Spirals, stars, marks like river bends. Now I carve to remember who I still, he added. Clara reached for the wood, her fingers brushing his. She traced a line slowly, then whispered, I forgot how to remember. He didn't say she hadn't. Didn't say anything at all. He just placed another piece of cedar in her hand and let her start carving. They thought she was broken. But someone saw gold in the ashes. The fire didn't come all at once. It started in small ways. A breath of warmth where cold had settled, a single ember refusing to fade. Silas brought cedar logs down from the ridge. Clara found an old hammer buried in the sow, just behind her cabin. They worked without speaking, hands busy with things that felt real, patching walls, setting stones, laying kindling for something neither of them dared name. Each night, they sat by the fire, smoke curling into the dark. And each night, Clara waited for the wind to change, for the town to come for her, for the past to find them both. The town didn't come with torches. It came with silence. No one spoke her name. No one looked toward her land. The sheriff didn't ride out again, and the store stopped holding a ration box in the back. It was as if she had already left, and maybe she had. Maybe the Clara they whispered about, the one who survived, the one who never screamed, the one who walked alone and never asked for kindness. Maybe she was gone, and maybe that wasn't a bad thing. But just when she thought the past had loosened its grip, the wind carried something new, not a warning, a return. Silas saw them first, two riders slow-moving, their coats dusty from travel, not from town, not from anywhere close. Clara was mending the porch when he set his mug down with a quiet thud. They're looking for something, he said. She didn't ask who, didn't need to. Her hands tightened around the hammer. Silas stood, stretched slow. I'll meet them first. Clara said nothing, but she moved beside him, because some ghosts need two graves before they're buried right. They stopped at the fence. The older one, gray at the temples, looked at Silas first. You got a name? Got two, Silas said. Neither's yours to call me by, the younger man scoffed. Pinkerton said you were a hard one. Clara caught the flicker in Silas's jaw, just a breath of something old, locked away. The gray-haired man turned toward her. You're the widow. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. He nodded like he understood something no one had said. We heard what happened to that wagon train. A pause. You lost everything. Clara's hands curled. The hammer felt heavier. The younger man leaned forward. Funny thing, though. Some folks say the wrong one survived. Silas shifted then, just a half step forward. Subtle. Not a shield, but a signal. Clara didn't need protection, but she wasn't alone either. The older man sighed. We just need to know what you saw. She met his eyes. Cold. Steady. I saw fire, she said. Silence stretched between them. Then the older man pulled his reins, tipped his hat, and turned. But the younger one, he stayed a moment longer, eyes dark with something Clara had seen before. The kind of man who didn't believe in ghosts, but hunted them anyway. Fire doesn't burn alone, he said. It always comes back. Then he followed his partner down the trail. Clara watched them go. Silas exhaled. Old history, he murmured. Not done with me yet. Clara looked at him then, really looked. You leaving? She asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the dust swirling behind the riders, at the way the past never really faded, just settled until the wind picked it up again. Then, finally, not unless you are, they built a second fire that night. Not for warmth, not for light, for something else. Clara took her wedding veil, folded and buried at the bottom of an old trunk. She hadn't touched it in years, hadn't wanted to. She placed it in the flames, watched it curl, blacken, disappear. Silas didn't say a word, just watched with her. Some ghosts don't need graves, some just need to be let go. The town waited for them to fall apart, but some stories don't end in ruin. Some bloom where the silence once lived. Spring came late to Broken Trace. The snow melted slow, leaving behind pools of memory, muddy and quiet, like the past, learning to rest. Buds clung to the cottonwoods along the river. The sky felt higher somehow, softer in the mornings, and in the space between thaw and bloom, Clara stood at the edge of town. She hadn't walked its dirt path in months. Not since the night the wind carried her away. But this morning she wore her boots clean, shoulders square, the hem of her coat brushing the tips of wild sage. Silas walked beside her. The town felt smaller now, not quieter, but easier to look in the eye. Old men leaned out on porches. Women pretended not to see her. Children watched from behind curtain lace. No one spoke her name, but no one stopped her either. At the general store she paused. She remembered the girl behind the counter, freckled, kind before the whispers turned her gaze. Clara stepped through the door like it belonged to her again. Inside, the air smelled of tobacco and yeast. The girl looked up and froze. Then Silas stepped forward, placing 2 silver coins on the counter. 1 hammer, 3 nails, and a spool of blue thread, he said. The girl glanced between them. Clara didn't flinch. Finally, the girl nodded, gathered the things, and placed them gently in a cloth bag. Clara looked her in the eye, just once. The girl looked back, not with pity, not with fear, just recognition. Outside, Silas smiled faintly. That was your last test, he said. Clara raised an eyebrow. Did I pass? He took her hand. No. You rewrote the test. They didn't leave right away. Instead, they built something new, out of the old boards, the old ache, the old stories left behind in ashes. It wasn't a ranch. Not yet, but the barn doors swung open to light, and the well they dug together hit water just before summer. Clara planted seeds behind the cabin. Silas repaired the porch in the evenings, and one night, when the stars gathered like witnesses, he pulled a ring from his coat pocket, plain, silver, shaped by hand. I never believed in signs, he said, but then the wind brought me to a fire that never died. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. She just nodded once, slow and sure. They married under a willow tree that leaned like it had been listening all this time. Only 2 others came, the girl from the store, and an old Cheyenne scout named Walks with Cinders, the man who'd found Clara's tracks in the snow so long ago, and told no one. He stood beside her like an anchor made of wind and wisdom. They didn't need a preacher. Just the river, the stars, and the fire between them. A year later, they welcomed a son. He was quiet when he was born, eyes wide, no cry. Clara smiled and whispered, just like me. They named him Eli. After the brother she lost, after the fire that didn't win, Clara never wore the locket again. She buried it under the tree where they said their vows. No words, no ceremony, just earth reclaiming what it never meant to hold. Some folks still whispered when they passed through town, but most just nodded now. Some waved, because rumors can't live where the truth has taken root. And in time, even Broken Trace forgot what it feared. But the cabin, the willow, the quiet strength in Clara's eyes. They remembered everything. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle